James was driven speechless by the situation. Drying laundry. His deadly needle weapon, the crucifier, was used to dry laundry. This was a weapon he obtained 10 years ago that contributed to his mysterious medical skills. The crucifier consisted of 81 very special needles that formed a steel wire. James went to the balcony. His steel wire was hanging on the balcony with several pieces of underwear on it. James' eyebrow twitched out of incredulity. He took off the underwear and took down the crucifier. The steel wire made of silver needles seemed to come to life and instantly wrapped around James' arms. Thea suddenly emerged from the inside. By the way, what do you need the steel wire for on a business trip? It's such a neat little tool to have around the house. James smiled again and said nothing in response to her question. Darling, it's getting late. I need to report to the company right now. He went back to his room, took out a black trench coat from his closet, and put it on. Travel safe, daring. Thea wished her husband. Thanks. James turned and left. Ads by Pub Future. Gone was the smile he had earlier on his face. Now it was replaced with a cheerless expression. He took out his phone and immediately contacted the Blythe King. Blythe King, get me a private plane right now. I need to go to the Southern Plains. The Blythe King was about to ask what business he had in the Southern Plains, but James had already hung up the phone. A few moments later, Kensington Military Region, open field. A helicopter was parked. In front of the helicopter stood a young man in a black trench coat and a middle-aged man in a military uniform. The Blythe King asked, "Why are you going to the Southern Plains? You've already resigned and are no longer the Black Dragon. You no longer have the right to mobilize the Black Dragon army." The Blythe King sensed James seething with murderous intent. He narrowed his eyes. "What's the matter? What happened?" "Some trivial matter," James blinked at him and replied vaguely. "Do you need my help?" The Blythe King offered. He did not understand what was happening, but he could tell from James' expression it was not a trivial matter like he said but something severe. James waved his hand dismissively. His coat flapped in the wind as he stepped forward, and boarded the helicopter. The helicopter slowly took off and disappeared from the Blythe King's sight. The Blythe King furrowed his brows. "There's nothing wrong, so why are you suddenly going to the Southern Plains?" The Blythe King pulled out his phone and called Henry. "Sorry, the phone number you've dialed is unavailable." "Huh, what's going on? Why is his phone turned off?" The Blythe King frowned deeper as he muttered to himself. He had a very bad feeling. Something must have happened for James to travel to the Southern Plains. Something was about to happen in the Southern Plains. Something terrible. Although he was unsure of what was happening, he was not too worried. Despite James resigning from his position, the Black Dragon army was still loyal to him. He had an absolute position in the Southern Plains. Thus, even if he retired and returned to the Southern Plains, no one dared to touch him because of his overwhelming power. James took the private plane to the Southern Plains. On board the plane, his grim expression never left his face. He took out his phone and dialed a number. He called the number that contacted him in the morning. It did not take long for someone to pick up the call. "I'm on the way. Who are you, and what have you done to Henry?" "Head to Southern Plains Mount Thunder Pass. Someone will contact you when you arrive. I'm warning you. I'll make sure you die a gruesome death if Henry loses even a strand of hair from his head." Beep, beep, beep. The other party hung up. James sat on the plane as a broody expression clouded over his face. The cabin temperature seemed to drop by several degrees from his chilly attitude alone. Soon, the plane landed in the Southern Plains. James received a phone call as soon as he got off the plane. It was an unknown number. "Black Dragon, head to the Mount Thunder Pass alone. You must not bring anyone with you. You can be prepared to collect Black Shadow's corpse if we spot someone following you." The other party gave him brief directions and hung up the phone. James frowned. How did he get contacted the literal moment he stepped off the plane? Had the enemy been watching his every move and was his whereabouts exposed to them? Who was targeting him? This was the headquarters of a military region in the Southern Plains. As soon as James got off the plane, a group of people rushed to greet him. The person in the lead was the lieutenant in uniform with a one-star badge on his shoulder. Behind him was a group of fully armed warriors also in uniform. "Attention! Thousands of soldiers rushed over, stood in front of James, stood straight, and raised their right hands to their brows. Ads by Pub Future. You're finally back, Commander. The soldier with a one-star badge approached excitedly. This was the Lieutenant, Levi Grant. He was in his 40s and had an angular face with a scar, which gave his appearance an intimidating edge. All right, everyone can disperse now. Prepare an off-road vehicle filled with gas and an extra 2 barrels of gas in the trunk. I'll be leaving the border. Levi licked his lips anxiously. Where are you off to, Commander? James did not elaborate on the details. He was currently being watched by the enemy, so it was impossible for him to lead an army out there. Henry's life would be in danger if he took an army with him. He knew it would be dangerous to go alone to Mount Thunder Pass. The mountain was a dangerous place, and there was a good chance he would not make it out alive. Although it was dangerous, he had to go. Levi. Yes, sir. Prepare a bulletproof vest for me. All right. Levi immediately presented the vest to him. James put on the bulletproof vest. Soon, the off-road vehicle was also filled with gas and ready to leave. Levi asked again, Commander, why are you going to Mount Thunder Pass? Let me come with you. I'll bring 10,000 soldiers with us. James waved his hand in refusal and said tersely, that won't be needed. I'll be going myself. If I'm not back by tomorrow morning, lead any army to Mount Thunder Pass and rout the mountain. Afterward, James got into the car, started the engine, and drove away from the military region. Mount Thunder Pass was at the Souther Plains borders. To be precise, this place was no longer under the jurisdiction of Saul. This was a place that no country controlled nor cared about anymore. This place was also on the border of many small countries. Mount Thunder Pass, Mountain Peak. A wooden house stood on the mountain peak. Tied up inside the room was Henry, the deputy commander of the Southern Plains Dragon Army. Henry was covered in blood on the ground with his eyes shut. It was hard to tell whether he was still alive. The house was full of mercenaries in camouflage uniforms that were armed to the teeth. Not far away were combat aircraft, tanks, and other terrifying lethal weapons. Reporting. A man in a camouflage uniform and mottled face rushed over, knelt on one knee, and reported, the Black Dragon has arrived in the Southern Plains and is making his way for Mount Thunder Pass. A man walked out from inside a wooden house. The man wore a black coat and mask. It made his appearance indistinguishable. A hoarse voice escaped his throat. Is he alone? Yes, the Black Dragon is alone. Excellent, his hoarse voice exclaimed with satisfaction. Following after, a sinister laugh echoed throughout the mountain. Black Dragon, Mount Thunder Pass will be your grave. This time, I've gathered elite killers from 28 countries on the mountain today. You won't be able to escape today even with your extraordinary strength. James had no idea that there were 28 elite mercenaries gathered at the top of the mountain waiting for him. The Black Dragon was too powerful a figure, and other countries were determined to remove him. Meanwhile, James continued to drive toward Mount Thunder Pass. Soon, he arrived at the border. Stop right there. A horn blared in front of him. Some military vehicles approached, and many fully armed soldiers emerged. Then, they approached him with their dark gun barrels pointed at James' off-road vehicle. James hit the brakes. Creak. The tires screeched against the ground, and dust rose up. He opened the door and got out of the car. Ads by Pub Future. Attention. The fully armed soldiers immediately straightened up and raised their hands in a salute. Commander. The soldiers addressed him in unison. Good work, men. James waved his hand, walked over, and lit a cigarette. He passed the cigarette to the leading officer. He patted their shoulders and said, it's a difficult job to guard the borders all year round. Commander, you're finally back. There are rumors outside saying that you've left. Even so, you will always be the Black Dragon and commander of the Black Dragon Army in our hearts. The leading soldier greeted him excitedly. James smiled. What are you doing here, Commander? James looked into the distance, and his face hardened. A grim expression appeared on his face as he said, I'm heading out of the borders to Mount Thunder Pass. Commander, Mount Thunder Pass has been chaotic since the Black Dragon Army withdrew its soldiers. I'll send troops to escort you. No need, I'll be fine going alone. James ignored his concerns. After speaking, he turned around and got back into the car. The tires kicked up clouds of dust as James drove away. The group of soldiers watched him leave. A soldier asked, "Captain, why is the commander crossing the borders to go to Mount Thunder Pass? I heard that trouble's been brewing there as of late." "I don't know. The commander has unparalleled skills and has gone through intense battles. Mount Thunder Pass is nothing to him. Continue with your duty." The captain shook his head at the soldier. "Yes, sir." The team quickly dispersed. James drove the car and quickly left the borders. After exiting the borders, he kept advancing until he soon came to the periphery of Mount Thunder Pass near the southern plain borders. Ahead was a bumpy mountain range. The mountain resonated with the guttural roars of a myriad of unknown creatures. James stopped the car in the nearby bushes and covered it with branches. Then, he returned to the main road, took out his phone, and called the number that had initially contacted him. The line connected quickly. "I've reached Mount Thunder Pass. Where is Henry?" "Black Dragon, head up the mountain if you want to save Henry. He is on top of Mount Thunder." James glanced at the mountain before him, lit a cigarette, and took a deep drag. Smoke flowed out of his nose, and he took a big step forward. His big leather boots thumped as they made contact with the ground. Mount Thunder, mountaintop. Many mercenaries were gathered here. The leader was a man in a black robe and a mask. He sat in front of the wooden house, with a cigarette in his mouth. "Our spies along the way have reported that the Black Dragon has arrived at the foot of Mount Thunder Pass and is now ascending the mountain. He will be arriving within 3 hours. Kill him." The masked man's throat gave way to a harsh voice. "Open fire once the Black Dragon enters shooting range. Kill him by any means necessary. However, tell the men to be careful not to expose themselves. Black Dragon isn't an ordinary person, and he's extremely skilled." "All right." James hid the car and ascended the mountain road. He glanced ahead and took out his phone. His phone had fallen silent. His whereabouts seemed clear to the enemy despite the lack of a tracker on him. With this, he deduced that they were somehow tracking him through his phone. He dashed out and disappeared into the forest beside the mountain road. Entering deep into the mountain forest, he managed to find a hare and tied his phone to it. James patted the hare's small head and released it. The hare instantly disappeared into the forest. Meanwhile, James walked out of the dense forest and made his way to the mountaintop. "Where's the Black Dragon?" His phone location seems to be wandering around the mountain and seems to be getting farther from Mount Thunder Pass. As expected from the Black Dragon, he noticed what we were doing. He's definitely making his way here as we speak. Pass down the order for everyone to stay on guard. Use drones to keep an eye on the mountain trails. We must track him down. Roger. Just then, a huge man walked out of the wooden house. The huge man was 2 meters tall and had a very rugged appearance, with arms larger than an average adult's waist. Ads by Pub Future. Although he was a foreigner, he spoke Saul's language fluently. "You are being too careful. There are 28 elite killers gathered here today. Every one of them is the best of the best in this world. The only concern is that the Black Dragon doesn't show up. This mountain will be his grave. Even if he had insane skills, he won't be able to dodge death forever." The man wearing a mask regarded the huge man. "You don't know the Black Dragon's strength. Do you have any clue how many people died during the battle that earned him the commander position? It happened right on Mount Thunder Pass. He single-handedly invaded the enemy's camp and slaughtered every single soldier. Afterward, he returned to the southern plains with the head of the enemy's commander." Hee hee. Laughter echoed from the nearby trees. A woman dressed in black leather armor with long black hair was perched nimbly on one of the trees. She jumped off the tall tree and landed gracefully on the ground. "I've long heard of the Black Dragon's exploits. It'll be such a great opportunity to fight against him today. Willie, you must ensure that the people outside don't accidentally kill him. We'd have come here for nothing otherwise." The man dressed in black and wearing a mask was called Willie. He was the one who gathered elites from 28 countries for this assassination plan. He looked at the woman in black leather armor and reminded her, "Blossom, don't be careless. You underestimate the Black Dragon's strength." Rumble. Suddenly the ground shook with a loud rumble. The crowd turned toward the sound. The source of it was a short man only 156 centimeters tall. Although he was relatively short in height, the ground rumbled with his heavy footsteps. Every step he took sounded like the ground was being crushed underneath his feet. I, Solomon Tate, swear to kill the Black Dragon if he dares to show himself here. That's the spirit. At the same time, another gruff voice boomed from another direction. Willie glanced at these powerful mercenaries. With a solemn expression hidden under his mask. These people were the elite forces of their countries and were highly skilled. However, they did not understand the magnitude of the Black Dragon's strength and had seen his skills firsthand. I hope the plan doesn't go down the drain. He sighed internally. Meanwhile, James had already sneaked into the mountains. He was like a nimble monkey, effortlessly traversing the forest path, and was able to scale tall trees in just a few steps. The steep stone walls were like a flat road to him. Out of the corner of his eye, he spotted the drone in the sky. Immediately, he clung to the cliffside and froze. It was not until the drone had flown far away that he began to move again. On the cliff of a mountain opposite Mount Thunder Pass, James crossed the mountain forest and came to the mountain opposite Mount Thunder Pass. He had been in the southern plains for a decade and knew the terrain of Mount Thunder Pass like the back of his hand. He knew he could not act recklessly if he wanted to rescue Henry. Mount Thunder was an extremely dangerous place. He hid behind a tree on the cliff, took out binoculars, and observed the movements on Mount Thunder Pass in the distance. He saw many fully armed mercenaries, combat aircraft, tanks, heavy artillery, and other lethal weapons. His lips twisted in a scowl upon seeing the scene. It would be difficult for him to secretly rescue Henry since Mount Thunder was so heavily guarded. If he simply showed himself, a fierce battle would ensue. James was not afraid of fighting. However, he was afraid Henry's life being used as leverage against him during the battle. After observing the enemy's situation, James quietly descended the mountain and approached Mount Thunder. Not long after, he saw fully armed mercenaries ahead. He cautiously scanned the surroundings and found countless snipers hidden throughout the area. There were many people hiding on the mountain roads to the top. The whole area was filled with danger, and he'd be courting death if he continued to advance. Yet, Henry would be in danger if he did not ascend the mountain. Henry had followed him for many years, and he was not going to let him die a terrible death on Mount Thunder. After observing the terrain, James quietly moved on. Eventually, he emerged again on top of a big tree where a sniper had hidden under it. Ads by Pub Future. He reached behind his back and took out 2 silver needles. He swung his hand. Whoosh! 2 silver needles flew out with great force. The sniper who was hidden in the bushes slumped forward to the ground soundlessly. After getting rid of one of the hidden snipers, James sneaked off. He had to plan his moves carefully. So, he had no choice but to advance one step at a time up the mountains. He used the terrain to his advantage to conceal himself. He quietly took down all the hidden snipers he could find along his path. At this point, more than 50 snipers had already died in his hands. At this moment, he was less than 1,000 meters away from Mount Thunder's peak. The dense forest eventually gave way to an empty mountain peak ahead of him, which meant he had nowhere to continue hiding. He would be exposed instantly if simply continued his approach, and the mercenaries would immediately shoot him full of holes. James decided to hang back and stopped himself from taking any thoughtless actions. Instead, he waited for an opportunity. Time passed by minute. After waiting for 3 hours, he finally found the opening he needed. A lone mercenary entered his sight. He immediately pounced on him from the tree. He sandwiched the mercenary's head between his legs and exerted his force on the man. The mercenary's head was snapped instantly, and he fell to the ground without ever having the chance to scream. He quickly caught the body to prevent him from falling to the ground and making a sound. James quickly hid back down, took off the mercenary's clothes, grabbed his weapon, and smeared some face paint he had prepared in advance all over his face. Afterward, he boldly walked into the open. He met up with the patrolling mercenary team and followed in the team's rear. Mountaintop. There were many strong fighters gathered. Willie watched the sunset, knowing it would soon be dark. He knew that the Black Dragon was exceedingly dangerous and that it would be challenging to spot him once it was dark. He could sense that James was nearby even right now. Bring him out. Soon a few mercenaries walked into the wooden house and dragged out Henry, who on the verge of death. Willie stood up, pulled out his gun, and stepped on Henry. Afterward, he took out a loudspeaker and shouted, "Black Dragon! I know you're here. Show yourself, or else Black Shadow will be buried with you today. The loudspeaker blared, and his voice echoed throughout the mountains and valleys. After threatening James, he quickly instruct everyone to move closer to Mount Thunder. Willie, Sniper 1 has not responded. There is also no response from Sniper 2. Various reports entered Willie's ears. Under the mask, his expression was dark. He knew that the Black Dragon had quietly gotten rid of these snipers. James had disguised himself among the mercenaries. He avoided any rash actions the entire time. Instead, he silently observed. When Willie ordered everyone to move toward the mountain top, he followed the mercenaries in tow. After they gathered at the top, James scanned his surroundings. He was able to make a rough guess on how many people were gathered there. There were around 500 mercenaries and all of them were armed to the teeth. The remainder totaled up to 50 people, including foreigners. He saw Henry, who was being trampled underfoot, surrounded by 7 or 8 men. They all pointed their guns at Henry's head. If he had made one wrong move, Henry would have been killed on the spot. Even if James believed he could kill everyone here, he chose his actions carefully. He was here to save a life, not to kill. Willie's eyes scanned the mercenaries gathered before him. He suddenly realized something and yelled, "Everyone, retreat." After that exclamation, he grabbed the dying Henry off the ground and pressed a gun against his head. Then, he once again looked at the mercenaries who had retreated. "I know you are in there, Black Dragon. Show yourself now if you don't want him to die. Or else, I'll blow his brains out." Hearing this, the fighters from 28 different countries were on high alert. They watched the mercenaries from afar intently. James, who had concealed himself among the mercenaries, wore a grim expression. Who was the masked man? He seemed to know much about him. Ads by Pub Future. Black Dragon, since you're here, show yourself. I'm curious to see if you are truly that impressive as the rumors say. Today, I will slaughter the dragon for all to see. The fighters from 28 different countries cheered on. Willie pressed the gun against the back of Henry's head and yelled, "I'm going to count to 3. If you don't show yourself by then, I'll kill him immediately." 1. He called out all the while watching the group of mercenaries closely. 2. His eyes scanned the crowd. However, no one moved a muscle. A silver needle appeared in James' hand. He threw it. The mercenary in front of him cried out in pain. Hearing this, everyone got out of the way. Some in the front opened fire directly. The man who cried out was shot dead immediately and collapsed in a puddle of blood. Everyone trained their firearms at the mercenary who had just collapsed onto the ground. "Go have a look," Willie instructed his men after seeing the commotion. Yes, a few of his men approached cautiously. Meanwhile, James watched Willie's every move. Willie was shrewd. He hid behind James and surrounded himself with the foreign fighters. Although James had never seen them before, he got the sense that they were both formidable and capable fighters. He surmised that they were professional fighters that should not be underestimated. James reached back and grabbed a few more silver needles. Flick! He deftly threw the silver needles. The mercenaries who were struck exclaimed in pain and surprise. "Ah! Irk!" Following that, James swiftly went on the offensive. Everyone struck by his needles cried out painfully. The sound of screams was coming from all directions. Willie's face beaded with sweat. He knew that the Black Dragon was hidden among the mercenaries. He immediately barked an order, "Kill them all. Spare no one." An armored vehicle armed with machine guns from afar immediately opened fire upon receiving Willie's orders. In an instant, many mercenaries were mowed down and their bodies heaped on each other in a gurgling pool of blood. The moment Willie told his men to shoot, James moved. Swiftly, he dashed toward Willie. "Stop him now," Willie exclaimed urgently as he saw a figure closing in on him. "Stop right there, Black Dragon." Willie pressed his gun against Henry and fired a warning shot. "Stop right there or I'll kill him," he said coldly. James was around 10 meters away from Willie. He stopped in his tracks. At that moment, hundreds of firearms were immediately pointed at him. "Ha ha ha." Willie burst into a peal of laughter. "So what if you're the Black Dragon? You're still lost to me in the end." James looked at the masked Willie, and his face darkened. "I've shown myself. Let him go. You wish. This will be your final resting place." James said disinterestedly, "I've already resigned from my post." He hasn't. He's still a general of the southern plains. Killing him will only incur the wrath of Saul. Are you willing to stand against the fury of Saul and millions of the Black Dragon army? I assure you, if he's dead, the Black Dragon army will storm out of the pass and trample all neighboring small states underfoot. Blood will be spilled. There's no way you know whoever you are acting on behalf of can withstand the consequences. I'm the one you want. Let him go. James uttered every word deliberately. Upon hearing this, Willie's expression grew worried beneath his mask. James was right. Willie didn't dare to act on his own without asking for approval. With his gun still pressed against Henry's head, he pulled out a phone and called a number. He wanted to ask for further instructions from the one who orchestrated all this. James watched him closely. Ads by Pub Future. Henry was at death's door. His face was ghastly pale. As a talented doctor, he was able to assess Henry's condition with a single glance. The man was gravely injured and would die soon if he didn't get urgent medical intervention. Master, the Black Dragon has shown himself. My men will kill him if I just give them the word, but what should we do with Henry? James watched the ghost-masked men attentively. The time for him to take action had come. He gently waved his hand. Silver needles shot out from his hands like laser beams. Hundreds of men immediately collapsed on the ground. The unaware Willie was still on the phone. At that moment, a silver needle struck his wrist. Ah! He dropped his gun. James dashed forward and kicked. Willie. The impact sent Willie flying several meters away. James quickly went to help Henry up. However, 28 fighters surrounded him and blocked his path of retreat. Henry. James ignored them. He lay Henry on the ground and gently slapped his face. However, Henry didn't regain consciousness. Although he was still breathing, he had long been unconscious. Kill him. Willie bellowed from afar with rage as he got up from the ground. Walking toward James, who was completely surrounded, he looked at him and laughed. Did you really think you could leave empty? Thunder safely. 28 foreign fighters are gathered here, and each of them is renowned for their skills. This will be your final resting place. Calmly, James stood and scanned the fighters. Willie, step aside. Leave the Black Dragon to me. I'll slaughter the dragon for the world to see. Willie, you're dismissed. There's nothing else for you to do here. The 28 foreign fighters leered boorishly. Arrogant and vain, these fighters were the strongest in their respective countries and had never tasted defeat. The Black Dragon's name was renowned throughout the world. If they managed to kill him, they'd be able to take all the acclaim for that deed themselves. They had long heard of the Black Dragon's heroic deeds but never had the opportunity to face off against him. At long last, he stood before them and the opportunity was ripe for the taking. What are you doing? I call the shots around here. Kill him now. Willie growled threateningly and pointed the gun at James. Bang! James had been shot. Though it didn't hit his vital parts, he was bleeding from the chest. Although he was shot and clearly injured because of it, he didn't collapse and remained standing. Are you tired of living, Willie? The huge man stepped forward and slapped Willie across the face. Willie's face swelled and stung due to how forceful the slap was. The slap sent his body spinning and he collapsed to the ground. Kill the rest so that we can fight the Black Dragon without anyone interfering. Don't say I play dirty, Black Dragon. You are a genius doctor, aren't you? I'll give you half an hour to treat your injuries. Then, we'll fight. You can only leave empty. Thunder alive if you can defeat all of us. If you lose, this will be your grave. The fighters didn't want to kill James in the state he was in. They all wanted to defeat James in a proper fight and claim the title of the #1 fighter in the world. Willie, who was sent flying earlier, got up from the ground and shrieked furiously, "Do you have any idea what you are doing? Do you seriously think your bunch of small fries can defeat the Black Dragon? Get a grip. I'm ordering you to kill him now." James crouched down. He looked at Henry on the ground and took his pulse. James' face darkened. He swiftly marked the vital acupoints on Henry's body and pulled out a few silver needles. Dexterously, he inserted 5 silver needles into Henry's vital acupuncture points. Henry's life was hanging by a thread. James had to end the battle as soon as possible. He needed to get Henry out of here and treat his injuries. Otherwise, it'd be too late. Willie pulled out his gun once more. "Move and you're dead." The 28 fighters in turn pointed their guns at Willie. James stood up. The 81 needles of abomination, which were wrapped around his arms, appeared in his hands in an instant. It turned into a wire and flew toward Henry's chest. It penetrated deep into his body and pulled the bullet out. With a murderous look, James glared at his enemies. Ads by Pub Future. Everyone could feel his killing intent. Willie was genuinely fearful now. He barked, "What are you waiting for? Kill him, now." On the other hand, the 28 fighters were thrilled upon seeing James' serious expression. James pressed one of the ends of the wire. The wire immediately disintegrated and fell into his palm as silver needles. He flung the needles. The surroundings filled with screams. Many mercenaries collapsed to the ground. After being thrown, the silver needles returned and gathered in James' hand to once again form a wire. At that moment, only the 28 fighters and Willie remained. Willie quivered in fear. The 28 fighters finally felt fear for the first time. What was that move? There were hundreds of mercenaries around them just a moment ago. How did they collapse to the ground in the blink of an eye? They couldn't figure out how James managed to kill them. Wearing an irritated expression, James looked at them. "Let's level the playing field. I suggest all of you come at me all at once. Otherwise, you'd stand no chance at all." The fighters looked at one another. They nodded in unison. Soundajet Holdings Limited, digital marketing agency. At that moment, a burly and powerfully built man made the first move. He clenched his fists and dashed toward James. He leaped up 3 meters high and landed on the ground. Boom! The earth seemed to shake from the force of the impact. He leaped once more and appeared before James in the blink of an eye. He slammed his fists toward James with the intent to kill. His punch was at least 1,000 pounds in strength. A wall would instantly crumble to dust, and an elephant would be killed on the spot by the sheer power. James remained on his feet. Just as he was about to be crushed, he clenched his fists and blocked the attack. Their fists collided with each other. The sound of bones cracking rang through the air. The well-built man screeched in agony and was sent flying by the shockwave. James kept the momentum going. He leaped a few meters high and stomped the man in midair. The man crashed to the ground. His chest had caved in, and his fists were a bloody mess. His eyes were bulging, and his face contorted in a mixture of pain and fear. Too strong. Before he could finish his sentence, he dropped dead. James paid no heed to the dead man and turned to face the remaining 27 others. The remaining 27 men shuddered. Though they had heard of the Black Dragon's strength, they didn't expect it to be this terrifying. The man who was just killed was called Titan. He was the strongest fighter in all of Malgudi. The Malgudians were widely known as the warrior race, a title they wholly deserved. Upon seeing this, Willie was left speechless. He grabbed a machine gun on the ground and blasted away at James. Die! Die! James was nimble. He rolled toward Titan's corpse and used it as a shield against the burst of gunfire. Then, with a flick of his finger, a silver needle flew out from his hand and plunged into Willie's body. Willie immediately went limp and fell to the ground. As he knew Willie wasn't the mastermind behind everything, he made sure to leave him alive. Willie was the only lead he had in uncovering the person who was actually behind all of this. After taking Willie out, he looked at the remaining 27 fighters. Although they were stunned by James' true strength, they were nonetheless the elite of their respective countries. They had undergone rigorous training to get as skilled as they were. How could their pride let them back out now? "We'll attack all at once." All 27 of them charged at once. A fierce battle broke out at the top of Mt. Thunder. James fought the remaining 27 alone. They were no ordinary people and possessed exceptional skills. Not only that, they also had a comprehensive understanding of martial arts. Everyone's body blurred into swift-moving shadows as they exchanged blows. Full of energy, James parried each and every blow. They were targeting his vital points all over his body. He had sustained injuries immediately after the battle had only begun. Despite the excruciating pain, he still held a strong will to fight. Ads by Pub Future. He leaped forward and gave a kick. The kick struck on a man's head. With his head caved in, the man's limp body was tossed like a rag doll. James flipped and landed flawlessly. Like a spring, he sprang up and quickly readied himself for battle again. The moment he rose, a saber came down towards him. James leaped out of range and instead of standing back up, he dashed forward like a ferocious beast. He entered close combat with a man and hurled him away. The battle raged on. The fighters fell one after another. Not long after, bodies were sprawled all over the top of Mt. Thunder. Only a single person remained standing. He was wearing a camouflage uniform with no military badge. His face was colored with paint, and his shirt was soaked with both his own blood and his enemy's blood. All 28 fighters lost their lives that day at Mt. Thunder. James towards Willie. Willie could only lay helplessly on the ground as he was unable to move. James' boots ominously plodded across the ground he walked. Willie could feel his heart practically climb out of his throat with every step James took. It was a foolproof trap. James should have been killed. However, the 28 fighters were too cocky and wanted to kill James by themselves for their own glory and renown. This gave James the opportunity to catch his breath between fights. James grabbed Willie by the collar and tore away his mask. The man behind the mask was a middle-aged man around 30 years of age. James had never seen him before. Wearing a flinty expression, he interrogated Willie, "Who's the one behind this?" James' roar rang through Willie's head. Willie was scared out of his wits. A buzzing sound was left in his ears. Slap. The sharp sound of a slap echoed in the mountain. Willie was slapped across his face. His face was swollen, and he vomited a mouthful of blood. Several of his teeth were also knocked out. "I'll ask you one more time. Speak." James lifted Willie. Willie quaked in fear. It was the Dr. King. Willie immediately ratted out his master under the threat of death. "Who's the Dr. King?" I don't know. That's what everyone calls him. He's also known as the miracle-working Dr. King. Please don't kill me. If you kill me, you won't make it out of here alive. Spare me, and I'll lead you out of here. The forces of the 28-Nation Alliance are almost here. Spare me. I'll try to intercede for you. James frowned. He suddenly realized there was a faint droning noise coming from far away. He looked up. A combat aircraft was heading in their direction. His face turned pale. He knocked Willie unconscious and hastily made his way toward Henry. Carrying Henry, he swiftly made his escape into the mountain range. The Black Dragon was the commander-in-chief of the Southern Plains. He was in charge of an army 1,000,000 strong and was also the guardian of Saul. It was the perfect opportunity to hunt him down now that he had resigned from his position. The Black Dragon had been the target all along. Not only did they have mercenaries in the 28 fighters, but they also had a trump card up their sleeves, the 28-nation military coalition. The 28 tiny nations at the border of the Southern Plains each mobilized 3,000 men and formed a 100,000 strong Grand Army. They only had a single objective in mind: exterminate the Black Dragon. Seeing the combat aircraft, James carried Henry and swiftly made his way into the depths of the forest. He knew that it was his only option if he wanted to make it out alive. If he were found, he would be relentlessly bombarded by the combat aircraft. Although his strength was unrivaled, he was defenseless against a terrifying flying machine. Soon, helicopters appeared in the sky. A helicopter with a skull symbol landed on top of Mt. Thunder. A man in an overcoat got off the helicopter. Upon seeing the corpses sprawled on the ground, his face darkened. He muttered, as expected of the Black Dragon. Not even the combined might of 28 elite fighters could stand against him. Immediately, he pulled out a walkie-talkie and gave an order: "The Black Dragon has left. Seal off the mountains immediately and search for him. Kill him before he leaves the area. Make this place his grave. Ads by Pub Future." Understood. After receiving the order, the military forces began combing the mountain. Waves of drones began a blanket search. At the same time, the military coalition forces crossed Mt. Thunder Pass. They split into teams of 10 for the search. Soon, it was dusk. The sky was getting darker. James hid in a natural cave amongst the dense foliage in the Mt. Thunder Range. Every inch outside was crawling with his enemies. Revealing his location was paramount to a death sentence. He was confident he could break through the enemy ranks if he was alone. However, he had to also consider the unconscious Henry. Breaking through the enemy's ranks in these conditions was near impossible. He could only wait and bide his time. Before he left, he had informed Levi to flatten Mt. thunder with the Black Dragon army if he did not return by tomorrow. Henry lay propped against a rock in the dark cave. James sat by his side and lit a cigarette. Only the light from the flickering flame could be seen in the pitch-black cave. After smoking his cigarette, James lifted Henry's arm and took his pulse. His pulse was weak. He could die any time. James' face clouded over with worry. Henry might not last till daybreak. Puff. James took a deep breath and examined Henry's injuries closely. After being captured, Henry suffered excruciating torture. All his bones were broken. The tendons of his arms and legs were contorted beyond recognition. He had also suffered a heavy blow to his head. Not only that, there was also a bullet wound on his body. He was in terrible shape. James pulled a silver needle out and performed a long-lost treatment. He used the silver needle to protect Henry's arteries and veins that led to his heart to keep him alive. Unfortunately, he was only able to treat the superficial wounds instead of the more life-threatening conditions. All he could do now was keep Henry alive. To save Henry, he'd need all sorts of treatment and medicine.